When Hasbro struck gold with the Transformers in the 80s, they wasted no time grabbing whatever robot toys they found in Japan and repackaging them as those robots in disguise. And with so many new characters introduced every year, it's only inevitable that for whatever reason, a few of them would slip through the proverbial cracks into obscurity. Fortunately, for a chosen few, this wasn't the end, as ironically, some forgotten bots found new life as part of a legendary team that was best known for their members dying. When the Transformers toy line started in the 80s, the formula was pretty simple. Take already existing robots from Japan and transform them into either heroic Autobots or evil Decepticons for the American market. And while a majority of these toys were mined directly from the rather robust world of Diaclone by the toy company Takara, those robots in disguise got so popular that Hasbro went to other Japanese toy companies for whatever converting robots they had in their pockets to keep up with the demand. Now, while I don't think that there is a positive correlation between non-Diaclone Transformers and less popular characters, sorry, Wind Charger fans, I do believe that this great influx of so many toys in such a short period of time did lead to a good number of them not being pushed as much as others, or just not clicking with the fandom, leaving them, well, for lack of a better word, forgotten. On the comics front, Transformers was also doing quite well for itself, especially in the UK, where unlike the US comics, which were released on a monthly schedule, the British got their Transformers comics fix on a weekly basis. And in order to keep up with this seemingly crazy release schedule, aside from reprinting the US comics, Transformers UK featured brand new stories penned by now legendary Transformers writer Simon Furman. How legendary, you may ask? Well, how about he's got an anti-energon substance and a city on Cybertron named after him? Legendary. Anyway, in order to not confuse readers of the main comic, Furman wrote stories meant to take place in between the US issues, and so by design, had to use characters not heavily featured in the main title. So the UK Transformers comics is famous for introducing a lot of original characters that didn't have any toy counterparts, or ones who weren't named Prime, Starscream, or Bumblebee. You know, all those other Transformer characters that had been, for whatever reason, forgotten. And that's where the Wreckers come in. In the Transformers universe, the Wreckers are a special task force supposedly composed of the deadliest, toughest, and oftentimes craziest warriors in the Autobot ranks. They're basically the team that handles the missions that no other bots would want. A last resort solution designed to come in and blow everything up. And given this premise, it's no surprise that despite their rather humble beginnings, the Wreckers have since grown to become almost as legendary as their creator, Furman. I mean, the Suicide Squad, Thunderbolts, Young Guns, there really is something intrinsically appealing about a ragtag bunch of rough-around-the-edges individuals who are usually forced to band together to fight against all odds for their own survival. And so it was in the pages of the UK comics that the Wreckers were born, a team composed of some original characters, but mostly odds and ends from the Autobot ranks that the writers from the US comic or cartoons did not care for much or had no idea what to do with. With their distinct battle cry of wreck and rule, the Wreckers turned out to be so popular that even after the UK comics ended, the concept of the Wreckers has been used in one form or another in almost all succeeding Transformers iterations. Anyway, because of the violent nature of their job, the group's membership is constantly changing as new bots come in to replace those who are killed in action. But despite this ever-changing lineup, there is one iteration of the group that is widely recognized by many Transformers fans, including myself, as the definitive classic lineup. And that's what I'd like to focus on with this story, as well as all the different toy options out there for fans to build up their own Wreckers display for their collections. So as the story goes, the original Wreckers team was formed by the rather plain-looking but golden-looking god, all-original UK Comics character, Emirate Zaron, leader of the Autobot Underground Resistance Movement and chairman of the Council of Autobot Elders. With a lineup composed of Deluxe Autobots Roadbuster and Whirl, Jumpstarter Bros Topspin and Twin Twist, And new character or characters, the CoJoined bots Rack and Ruin, they were led by another original creation, the rough and gruff Spartan-helmeted, harpoon-handed Impactor. And pretty soon after, this classic lineup was completed by the triple changer trio of Sandstorm, Broadside, and some obscure green dude named Springer. Is anyone familiar with that guy? Talk about obscure. Anyway, released as part of the second wave of Transformers in 1985, the toys that would become Roadbuster and Whirl, collectively identified as Deluxe Autobots, were originally created and sold by Japanese toy company Takatoku Toys. Best known for also creating a certain jet robot who would also fire up the fans with excitement when it would be brought over to the US and turned into the Autobot Air Guardian. So given that Hasbro merely leased the designs of Roadbuster and Whirl, both Deluxe Autobots weren't featured much or at all in the US cartoons and comics, which made them perfect candidates for the original Wreckers team. Of all the original Wreckers not named Springer, I would argue that the one-eyed Autobot Whirl has surprisingly become one of the most popular of the bunch, thanks to his extensive use in the long-running IDW comics. You could say that he was one of the major breakout stars of that universe. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that there is enough to give Whirl his own dedicated episode, but for now, let's just say that Whirl is an abrasive, unpredictable, and violent individual, an extremely damaged and chaotic character with deep psychological scars. In fact, this Whirl was super bad that he was kicked out of the Wreckers. And yes, this guy is an Autobot. But despite Whirl's recklessness and crude demeanor, he has gone on to become one of the most compelling and tragic figures, and dare I say, fan favorites in the Transformers in general. Whirl's deluxe mate, Roadbuster, may not have reached the same heights of popularity, but he has remained one of the longest-serving and most dependable members of the Wreckers crew. Unfortunately though, despite his immense armored frame and multiple weapons at his disposal, I will always remember Roadbuster for the gruesome way in which he ultimately met his end in the IDW miniseries The Sins of the Wreckers, wherein the evil Predacon scientist Tarantulas shrunk down and crawled inside Roadbuster's head, and then promptly reverted back to his original size. Yeah, poor guy basically got his head busted. Anyway, after the original Deluxe Autobots debut in 1985, we had to basically wait almost 30 years before we got official new toys of Whirl and Roadbuster as part of the generation's thrilling 30 line. And while I wouldn't go so far as to call them masterpieces, we're still waiting for those versions, official or third party, these guys are more than adequate to start off a Wreckers team chug style, which at this point is really the best we can do. Anyway, faring slightly better are the gimmicky Jumpstarter brothers, Topspin and Twin Twist, who also made their official debut in 1985. I say gimmicky because their toys basically revolved around a single action feature, which was to spring up and transform on their own. It was a cool gimmick at the time, I guess, but ultimately didn't endear them much with the kiddies, as from what I heard, they warmed the pegs like nobody's business. Fortunately, just like the forgotten Deluxe Autobots, that made the Jumpstarters fit the Wreckers team profile as well. Not counting Hasbro's poor attempt at a Wreckers combiner based on the awful Fall of Cybertron Bruticus set, which included both Jumpstarters, we had to wait a little longer to finally get actual modern updates of Topspin and Twin Twist, when they were finally included in 2017's Titan's Return toy line, with a new gimmick. No longer possessing that one-trick pony auto-transform feature, both Topspin and Twin Twist were now Headmasters, being partnered with Freeze Out and Flame Out, respectively, who transformed into their heads. I do think it's worth mentioning, though, that Headmaster gimmick aside, I find these Jumpstarter toys to be one of the best designed Chug Transformers to date. But if Headmaster Jumpstarters aren't your thing, an obscure and short-lived third-party company called Mech Ideas released Apex and Geminis, collectively known as the Demolition Crew, a few years earlier, who were a pretty decent representation of Topspin and Twin Twist. While I had never heard of this company before, I was intrigued enough to take a chance on these two guys. And while their alt modes are a bit meh, I think they packed a ton of personality and served their purposes on my display until the official headless ones came out. It's worth noting that in the IDW comics, Topspin and Twin Twist shared a branched spark, a 1 in a million aberration that basically means that through a phenomena called vicarious perception, Both Jumpstarters can feel each other's pain and more importantly are linked in both life and death. So basically, if one kicks the bucket, so does the other. And it's this special link that played an integral part in the manner both Topspin and Twin Twist met their end in quite a noble fashion. During a mission to recover the giant sentient computer Aquitas from the Autobot prison planet Garrus 9, which had been overrun by the fearsome Decepticon Overlord, Twin Twist is captured and is horribly tortured by the Decepticons. And so, in an attempt to kill two birds with one stone, end his brother's suffering and his, as well as reboot the Aquitas, which required a willing spark sacrifice to activate, Topspin feeds his own spark to the supercomputer, ending both Jumpstarters' lives. And talking about sparks, did you know that hearing from you guys will always spark joy for me? I mean, likes, subs are great. Please give me some if you haven't yet. But at the end of the day, it's about hearing from all you guys that really makes telling my stories worth it. So, if you have anything you'd like to share about the Wreckers, Transformers, toys, anything under the sun, let me know about it in the comments below. Tell me what's on your mind. And once again, thank you for the support you have all given in helping my channel grow. And with that, back to the story. Next, we have the two original Autobot triple changers. I'll get to the third one later. Unlike their Decepticon counterparts Astrotrain and Blitzwing that achieved some degree of popularity, Sandstorm and Broadside didn't quite catch on as much with the fandom. Actually, Sandstorm did manage to feature in a nice little story arc in the third season of the cartoon wherein he tried to help out his fellow triple changer and Decepticon outcast Octane escape from Galvatron's clutches. Unfortunately for Broadside though, I guess being a triple changer that transformed into a jet and an aircraft carrier who was afraid of heights and prone to seasickness didn't win him many fans. And what is even more unfortunate is that, as far as I can recall, neither Sandstorm or Broadside did anything spectacular as members of the Wreckers either. I mean, they were there, but on the bright side, at least neither of them died. As far as the toys went though, Sandstorm comes out on top with two modern versions released. The first one in 2013 was based on his more stylized IDW look, featuring a couple of extremely oversized rear wheels in buggy mode that converted into twin rotors in his now updated VTOL aircraft mode. A more traditional version based on his original toy came out in 2024 as part of the Legacy United line. Now, while I did get the stylized Sandstorm, I have yet to double dip on the Legacy United one as he naturally sported a toy-accurate head. I don't know, even if it was less detailed, when it comes to Sandstorm, I prefer his toon look more. Fortunately, it seems that a toon version is on its way, but we'll see. And as for Broadside, well, he got his first modern toy in 2017's Titan's Return line, now as a headmaster partnered up with Blunderbuss. Look, I know that a blunderbuss is a historical firearm and precursor to the modern shotgun, but really, could they have not chosen a more intimidating or cooler sounding name for the guy? Anyway, this new Broadside is just okay. I mean, it's a definite improvement over the original vintage brick, but you'd think that after over 30 years, Hasbro would come up with a better looking jet mode. I mean, the front of it looks fine, but when you get to the back, it seems as though the designers just couldn't figure out what to do with the legs and just said, fuck it, and just tucked them into some weird position and called it a day. And to make matters worse, remember his new partner, Blunderbuss, who was meant to pilot both modes? Well, for the jet mode, he fit nicely in the cockpit. But for the aircraft carrier mode, the designers had him sit on top of the control tower, which not only looks dumb, but unfortunately makes him look like he's taking a big dump on poor Broadside. Okay, to be fair, you could also seat him inside Broadside's weapon and plug that into the side of the carrier. Fortunately though, this isn't the only option for a Broadside for a Wreckers display, as years prior in 2012, an early trailblazer in the third-party Transformers scene, a company called Fans Project, gave us the formidable Assaulter. Assaulter was big, beefy, die-casty, and just perfect for any Wreckers collection. And he didn't transform into just two pretty good-looking alt modes. His robot mode actually had the ability to pay a loose homage to Broadside's two distinctive looks from the toy and cartoon. And as for his two alt modes, Fans Project applied more liberties to their designs with what I would imagine was their attempt to really finally make a broadside toy that was cool. Both modes looked nothing like the original vintage toy, especially the supposed aircraft carrier mode, which now looked more like a futuristic spaceship carrier, reminding me of the SDF-1 from Robotech. And the jet. Now that's how you do a jet. Anyway, it's been over a decade since his release, but as far as my records go, Assaulter still owns my broadside spot. Next up, we have two made-for-the-comics characters that were added to the Wreckers ranks. The first was the quite unique duo of Rack and Ruin. These guys were two identical small nondescript Autobots that were co-joined at the arms, leaving their respective free arms ending with a different weapon. One had a hammer and the other an anvil. Now, how sick would it have been if it was a hammer and a sickle instead, and they were colored red? Sorry. Anyway, I don't think they did anything special except beef up the Wreckers team until they were eventually killed off by Galvatron in the original UK comics. IDW did integrate these two in one of the earlier iterations of their Wreckers, and added a little bit more of a backstory. First, making them former Decepticons and actually triplets instead of twins. The third dude unfortunately was killed off really early on. An interesting bit IDW added was that their rather nondescript heads were actually helmets of the sensory deprivation type. I guess all that hammering eventually got annoying even for those two. Oh, and apparently, for those who care, Ruin is the ugly twin. Eventually though, after numerous adventures, Rack and Ruin died unspectacularly off-panel at some point, most likely succumbing to complications from being physically bonded together. Unfortunately, neither Hasbro nor any other third-party company has come up with a toy version of the Wreckers Rack and Ruin, but I would say that they both came pretty close. Once again, Fans Project came up with identical green bots named Recoiler and Riftshot, who, while released separately, could be combined at the arms for a pretty good homage. Incidentally, a recolored retool of this guy was also released as Fans Project's version of Roadbuster, called Revolver. And as for Hasbro, well, the 2018 cartoon series Cyberverse did have a character named Rack and Ruin, who did have a toy released. But instead of the traditional two co-joined bots, this guy was a single bot with two heads. I never watched the series, but from what I observed, this guy was used more as a comedy relief rather than a fearsome warrior. Hardly Wrecker material, but hey, it's an option. The second more impactful new character created in the UK comics was the original leader of the Wreckers, the rugged old warrior named Impactor. Now, this is just speculation on my part, but I'm assuming that since he was not based on any existing toy at the time, he was basically created to be killed off. True enough, it wasn't long before Impactor eventually died in the line of duty, sacrificing his life to save Emirate Sauron from a Decepticon assassin. Fortunately, Impactor proved popular enough to live on in other Transformers iterations, most notably in the IDW universe, where he is best known for disobeying a direct order and single-handedly slaughtering the Decepticon equivalent of the Wreckers, Squadron X, while they were all helplessly restrained as his prisoners. On a side note, this Decepticon, leader of Squadron X, is Macabre, who, like Impactor, is another original UK character, but more importantly, the assassin that attempted to take out Emirate Sauron, but ended up killing Impactor instead. So, I guess you could say that Impactor ended up avenging his own death? In another life, brother. But ultimately, this disgraceful act led him to being kicked out of the Wreckers and imprisoned in Garrus 9. In 2018's War for Cybertron trilogy, Impactor starts off as a Decepticon, but is left for dead after a battle and saved by Ratchet, which leads him to an uneasy alliance with the Autobots, and more importantly, a strong loyalty to the Autobot medic. So strong that it leads him to ultimately sacrifice his life, once again taking a fatal blast meant for Ratchet. Anyway, this short stint in the series earned Impactor his first official toy from Hasbro. Two actually, a Decepticon and Autobot version. And while it was a pretty decent toy, his deluxe size just didn't evoke Wrecker Leader to me. To be fair though, this wasn't supposed to be the Wrecker version of Impactor. For that guy, my money goes to the third-party company Mastermind Creations version, named Spartan. While initially Spartan wasn't on my list of must-haves, rave review after rave review slowly changed my mind and I eventually caved. Fortunately, everything I heard about this toy was definitely not exaggerated. Despite a rather compact and not very intimidating alt mode, Spartan definitely is Impactor, a perfect plastic rendition of the grizzled wrecker leader. Anyway, whether heroically sacrificing his life by taking a bullet for a friend or getting disgracefully discharged, it seemed that in any iteration, Impactor is predestined to be replaced as leader of the Wreckers. Just like Charlie Sheen's Dick Brewer in the previously mentioned Young Guns, who was killed off early to make way for Emilio Estevez's Billy the Kid to run the show, Impactor is dispatched to make way for the widely recognized leader and arguably the most famous wrecker ever, the triple changer, Springer. Unlike Sandstorm and Broadside, Springer did manage to get popular, thanks to being one of the main characters in the 1986 animated movie, who had better things to do than die. He's so popular that I actually have an entire episode for him. Granted, it's an old one, sorely needing an update, but still worth checking out in my opinion. Anyway, despite Springer's popularity though, it took quite a while for Hasbro to come up with an updated, modern version of him. And no, I am not counting any of the numerous helicopter and armored car Transformers painted green as official versions. So for the longest time, the best option for Springer belonged to, once again, the third-party company, Fans Project, who took the opportunity of a Springerless world and gave us their own version of the green triple changer, Warbot Defender. Now, as far as third-party Transformers are concerned, Defender is quite the historical piece as it was the very first ever originally designed and constructed third-party Transformer. And despite it being almost 15 years old, I would still say that for the most part, Defender still holds its own. And I wouldn't fault anyone for having this guy as their de facto wrecker Springer. Of course, Hasbro did eventually make up for lost time, releasing their first official triple-changing Springer in 2012, and also part of the Thrilling 30 line. Once again, this was a stylized Springer based on his IDW look. In fact, remember that IDW version of Sandstorm? Well, while it would naturally seem like that was an extensive retool of this Springer, apparently it may seem like it was the other way around, with Sandstorm being the original design and Springer the retool. Either way though, both these guys are excellent toys. Once again though, if stylized versions aren't your jam, Hasbro eventually gave us a basic meat and potatoes, albeit grim and grungy looking Springer as part of their Siege toy line, which they later cleaned up and slightly tweaked into what I consider to be the best Springer that you can get for your 1986 animated movie display in the Studio Series 86 Springer. Sorry, even after all these years, I'd still take Warbot Defender for my Wrecker's shelf. And speaking of that shelf, going back full circle, even if he wasn't officially a Wrecker, if you do want their founder, Emirate Zaron, as part of your display, Hasbro was nice enough to give us an official version that came packed with another UK comic-only character, Flame. Both really smart retools of older Reflector and War for Cybertron Megatron toys, respectively. Anyway, like I said earlier, the Wreckers ranks are one that is in constant flux, and there have been a good number of other equally or even more obscure Transformers who have been added to their ranks and, well, mostly killed off. We've got Rotor Storm, head blown off by Overlord after telling him a joke that the Decepticon found funny. His latest toy was released as a Generation Select recolor of Spinister. Pyro, Optimus Prime lookalike, overwhelmed by a mob of Decepticons who literally tore him limb from limb. His only modern update was part of a 2010 BotCon box set, a neat recolor of Universe Inferno. Iron Fist, or Fisitron, surprising survivor of the Garrus 9 mission that unfortunately succumbed to a mechanical aneurysm on the way back. Remember Mech Ideas? Before going belly up, they also did their own Iron Fist called Gauntlet. And now Hasbro just announced their own upcoming Iron Fist as part of their new Age of the Primes line. Guzzle. This little dude survived being ripped in half by Overlord and came back in a comically ginormous new body. Unfortunately, he ended up going batshit crazy, forcing Impactor to put him down for good via harpoon shot right through his head. Now, while there was a little live-action movie toy that could pass for a Wrecker's guzzle, I'd much prefer his jacked-up version in plastic form. Two more bots, the Target Master Scoop and Rotor Force member Leadfoot, have also been a part of different versions of the Wreckers, although I only remember Scoop as being that annoying religious nut who allied himself with Starscream in the IDW comics. For that role, he got an updated toy from the Thrilling 30 line, which has remained in my collection simply for sentimental reasons as I got the dude on my honeymoon. Leadfoot got a new toy too, even if it was just a quick repaint / retool of Kingdom Mirage. And while Leadfoot wasn't much to talk about as a traditional Wrecker, his name was good enough to use as one of the live-action versions of the Wreckers who were featured in the 2011 movie Dark of the Moon. Leadfoot, Roadbuster, and Topspin were basically Wreckers in name only, as they looked nothing like their traditional counterparts. Still, they were an entertaining trio who transformed into Mad Max-style rally cars and spoke like dreadnoughts. And while only Leadfoot is shown being hunted down and executed by the human organization Cemetery Wind in the next movie, Age of Extinction, it's safe to assume that the other two didn't survive long either. An interesting tidbit though is that the 3D model of Topspin, now sporting Leadfoot's head, was reused in the movie The Last Night for a random Autobot who sought asylum in Cuba, spending his days on the beach playing volleyball. Anyway, apparently this was done because Topspin didn't actually have any dialogue in Dark of the Moon, and so his head model wasn't rigged for movement, which led the animators to just use Leadfoot's head to create this Volleybot. Of course, if you want to just believe that Topspin switched out his own head for that of his dead mate as a tribute, that works too, I guess. That being said, all three of these dudes are available as part of the Studio Series line, as well as slightly upsized and improved third-party versions by Dream Factory. Anyway, so you know how at times something so niche can catch on and become mainstream? Well, that's eventually what happened to the Wreckers. Originally composed of Transformers no one really cared for, the concept of the Wreckers got so popular that pretty soon, all the cool kids wanted in, and all of a sudden mainstream characters like Bulkhead, Wheeljack, Cup, RC, and Perceptor were Wreckers. Perceptor? Sorry, not buying it. Even if you try to turn that damn scientist into a cold and calculating sniper. Geez, I mean, what's next? They start adding little girls to their ranks? Wait. Oh well, in the end, while I don't mind having these more recognizable characters in the Wreckers ranks, they will never be part of the classic lineup in my book. For me, the beauty and charm of the original Wreckers was that they were a group composed of obscure outcasts that Hasbro and most comic book writers didn't know what to do with. On their own, most of the members were pretty unspectacular, and it was only as a collective unit that they found their true calling as a crack, take no prisoners, elite team with a death wish: wreck and rule. And speaking of taking no prisoners, here's a dude who just takes heads. If you want to know more about this bad mother slagger, I have his story over here. Or if you want other Transformer stories, you can check out this playlist over here. Either way, thanks for watching, and I hope you come back for more.